And good morning and welcome to Moreness Culture. Good morning,
Uh,
Syl.
Good morning, Beena. Good morning. Good morning. I love that this is, that you say good morning to mourners culture. Yes.
Yes.
We are sharing mourners culture, and we were talking about that earlier. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Yeah.
Yes, it
Wonderful
is.
being.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal.
Yeah.
And welcome everyone, whoever is watching us live here on Facebook in Sassy Group, and also on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and also on Instagram, where
Yeah.
you can see and catch us live there. And soon it will be on available on TikTok also, and we'll see that okay how
Yes.
we are going to do there. So
Yes.
reaching out to different and multiple platforms, which is of course a new thing and also exciting. It
Yeah.
is adding, it is actually implementing and exercising and practically implementing moreness into our sharing. This is the
Yes.
moreness. Just
Yes.
before this live, Sil was talking about that. Okay, what is moreness for people? Because this it's a very common question, and I can say that okay, mostly or frequently asked question. Even sometimes when people don't ask, you can understand that they are lost. They are not getting it right.
Yeah.
Though they are super interested, they are super curious about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Not so
Feel
much getting
so
it right
happy.
as understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, yes, so it was this is pulling them in, but the clarity is not there. And I was thinking about that because
Yeah.
whenever you have a new idea, it is hard to explain. It is
Yeah.
hard to share exactly what's involved in it because it's a new thing. For new things in life, for new ideas, you need new vocabulary also. And that is
Correct,
the
correct.
toughest
And
part
and
of
you
it.
need to understand that it is new. And
Yes.
therefore it's not going to match your expectations, which means you need to set aside those expectations.
Yes,
That's
and
very
this is
critical.
where we this is where we are coming back to what we were discussing yesterday. That communication is a very tricky business,
Yeah.
and communication involves everything. Not just like okay, I'm going to verbally communicating it. It is about also about taking care of what I am sharing.
Yeah.
You are understanding it exactly what I'm trying to share here. This
Yeah.
is a big deal in way of impactability and capital H hearing and Moreness project to make it as much clear as we can. We really go above and beyond
Yes.
and try
Correct.
a different
Correct.
aspect, different perspective, different
Yeah.
vocabulary,
Yeah.
and using different terms and analogies
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
communicate what we want to share. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a very serious business for us
Oh yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
this is this is where the transformation actually starts. So let's come back to the
Right.
moreness topic.
Because we
What
we
is
are
moreness?
sharing. Oh, okay. Keep going. What is more? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
No. Please continue. I will continue after that. Yes.
I just wanted to say that why we make such an emphasis is because typically we perceive according to how we believe. So if you expect something to be in a particular way
Yes.
because you believe that's how it is, that's what you see. For instance, somebody sees us making videos in their mind, making this doing live on Facebook and all these places. Typically, the understanding and the belief is, oh well, they're doing it for the same reason everybody else does it, to get followers and to be popular and whatever. No, we're not doing it for those reasons. But because they don't have this newness, this moreness is not part of their awareness, their understanding. It's outside of their world. They don't see it. Yeah, it's not part of their paradigm. That's why moreness culture is, this is coming from a whole other perspective, a way. Oh, it's very different. It's different paradigm, different culture. We're using culture more than paradigm. Paradigm is hard to understand in general, but culture, you get a better idea. So, according to Mona's culture, oh, yeah, okay, very cool. You get an idea of what's going on. Very cool, very cool. So please keep going, Bina. Please keep going.
Yes. So the question was, what is moreness? And this is where that question is stuck in my mind. That yes,
Yeah,
and why it is a bit difficult, not exactly like, okay, it is not something impossible, but it is difficult, not because that I'm lacking in my sharing, in my vocabulary. No, it is because that it's a new idea. And to share something like perceiving energy directly, the idea, the perspective, it was really, I had no idea that, okay, how you are going to perceive energy directly unless or until you actually experience that. And this
Yeah.
is this is what is really, really crucial and important to understand, that whenever in life you get something above and beyond your experiences and expectations, this is where the moreness start. And you cannot explain it until you really exercise it, experience it. Like when you are really sharing your goodness with other people. For some people, surprisingly for me, really shocking, it was really shocking for me that for some people, that was beyond and above their expectation, that someone can be really, really good without having any personal agenda involved in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
where the moreness actually start, that things can
Exactly.
be beyond and above
Exactly.
my expectation and
Yes.
experiences, both.
Yes.
Both. And
Yes.
because it is very crucial to pay attention to the and emphasize on the experience, because usually we do assume things on the basis of the memories of our experiences, and this is how we evaluate the coming situation in our life. And this is
Yeah.
where the problem is, because if you are getting something other than what your experience was in the past, you will be completely lost. And this is the case with the moreness. When we keep repeating this word, when we keep sharing this idea, people really feel lost. What is the moreness they are talking about? Oh,
Yeah.
this could be this. Okay, this is this, but actually not, because you never experienced that. This is where the new paradigm start, the new culture start. And this is really, I want people to think about it, that we can have more than and beyond our expectations and our experiences. This is what moreness is. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
sir, for being so patient. I was just keen to share this.
Oh no, I love it.
This,
It's not about being
this was
patient.
my
It's
thought
about
of the day.
enjoying.
And
It's about
yes,
enjoying. I mean, what you're sharing is powerful, magical, wonderful stuff. So no, it's wonderful, Beena.
thank you so much, so much.
Absolutely
So now
wonderful.
we are
Always,
going to
every
start
day.
sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
You
we are going to
share
start.
moreness every day. Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh,
So
thank
moreness
you so much.
isn't only a way of being. It's understanding that which is outside of our usual. That's but also there's a lot that's outside of our usual that's not necessarily moreness. I mean, the understanding of it is moreness, but the thing itself might not be moreness. Like understanding aberrant psychology. The understanding is the moreness, not the aberrant psychology itself, right? That's kind of a lessness, right? It's a stressful issue. So, but in
Yes,
general, when we're sharing moreness, we're sharing that which is positive, that which is beneficial, that which is useful, and we're sharing it from that perspective that is outside of our expectations, our usual, and the bubble that we're in, and particularly it's outside of the superiority paradigm. Now, understanding the superiority paradigm itself, that's a moreness. Yeah, because we don't really,
yes,
we're not fully aware of it. We don't understand it fully. Yeah, I mean, that's book
yes,
one of the realism series. It's all about understanding the superiority paradigm, right? And where it starts, especially, I mean, it's written in a very particular way that you can see the starting point and take it to the fullness. Very powerful, very powerful. All right, let's continue with Musashi. Uh,
yes. So just to give you a bit of what we were doing yesterday, and what is the continuation here today, we were reading Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, or a Book of Five Ring, or the Book of Five Ring, or Book of Five Rings,
or
whatever you want
five
to
ring
call
book.
it.
I think it's five ring book.
Five Ring
That's
book.
what it is.
And Miyamoto Musashi, for me, that guy, he was also sharing the moreness beyond expectation,
Yeah,
because in that superiority paradigm culture at that time, this guy was going beyond and above the expectations and of course the needs, because he was actually breaking. this inner circle type of idea they had, that okay, yes,
Correct.
this has to be, the knowledge has to be, the wisdom has to be limited to certain people. He was breaking it by writing a book,
Yes.
by
Yes.
sharing. He took that step, and that was
Yes.
quite rebellious at the time. That
Yes.
was quite revolutionary. So I
Yes.
do really respect this guy now because of
Oh
this
yeah. Oh
this
yeah.
gesture
Oh yeah.
he showed
Oh
at
yeah.
that time, and it really needs a lot of courage to do that in that
Yes.
superiority
Yes.
paradigm culture.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was wonderful. Thank you, Miyamoto
Right.
Musashi, for writing this, for doing this.
Yes. Now we need to understand, right? In our modern world, we have tremendous freedom of being, and we take it for granted. Yeah. And
Yes,
in other words, you can dress how you like. Doesn't matter. I
yes.
mean, you go to any major city and you see all kinds of, you know, people that are dressing in very different styles, and some of them are very particular styles, like biker or goth or whatever, right? Um, but you can dress however you like. In Musashi's time, not happening.
Wow.
Nope,
See.
absolutely not. No, you looked a certain way, you dressed a certain way, and that's it in your station. Furthermore, the class system was very rigid. If you're a peasant and you have very little rights, you're very nothing, you're not really highly regarded, so there's this pressure and to behave according to your station, your place, know your place. And it's a very rigid system also, right? Proscribed behavior. Yeah, it's very specific, it's very detailed. So you don't have much
Hmm.
freedom of individuality, really. You do, but within the context, right? I mean, as a samurai, which is your job, you expected to do this and that and that. There's a lot of expectations in the culture. Whatever you do, expectations, very rigid society. Furthermore, right, the society, at least in that time too, is relatively brutal. Well, not relatively, it's very brutal. For instance, as a samurai, you had a particular status. Now, look how superiority paradigm comes into this. Yes, and one of the laws or rules that goes along with being a samurai could kill you as an ordinary citizen if you touched their person.
Hmm.
Yeah. If-
Hmm.
Now, not that you're going to go up and touch a samurai, but in other words, if you bump into a samurai, they could kill you just for doing that, right? So, of course, this led to the ability. But again, now we have to understand many of these things come not from the samurai themselves, but from the abuser, the BMN, who is the daimyo, the lord that they're working for. What does this allow the daimyo to do? If you want to get rid of somebody, you just send a samurai along, and oh, it bumped into me, and your samurai kills them. End of story. Right? Very easy way to get rid of people. But think of this on the culture. Yeah. You a non-samurai. And now you better watch your step. You better behave, right? Very, very, very focused society that is implementing obedience and conformity. Yeah. And also as a samurai, what does this do to your psychology? Of course, if you're an egomaniac and a narcissist, this is going to puff you up like crazy, right? And of course, lead to potential abuses. Now, that's where this culture of honor and integrity that's supposed to be underlying the samurai, it came about to balance these excesses, right? And of course, if you're a samurai that has integrity, you're not going to exercise that particular law and that freedom that you have. But still, when you look at it in the overall, the point I'm making is that at this time, the society is very, very, very rigid, even more so than in Europe, right? Which we don't have much literature and knowledge of societies in Africa and societies in South America. And what we do have, because they don't have written histories, right? What we do have, we have to take more from modern times and oral history, going back and observations of people in the past, and it's not the most ideal. But also, we tend to think of Africa as a unit. It's not. The amount of variety in culture is off the charts. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's some similarities, yes, because when you look at it in the abstract superiority paradigm, you see similarities. But you have to keep in mind 1/3 of Africa is not African as we tend to think of it. Yes, 1/3 of Africa is not African. It's Arabic. Yes, I looked it up. It's quite amazing. So we think of African, you think of black people. No, that's not African. That's, and even within that range, there's a great variety. So this idea of Africans, it's nonsense. I mean, we don't think of South Americans. They also vary a lot, right? We have to be careful. We have to be careful. But within European culture, there were great varieties. I mean, just go and ask any Italian or French or German, and from an historical point of view, there were lots of differences, but lots of similarities also. In that, things like the guild system was common, right? Economy, very similar. And, that guild system and the class system and all of this, hereditary nobility, all that, it made for many similarities. And likewise made for a somewhat of a rigidity because those societies at that time were greatly influenced by religion. Now, in Japan, yes, the religion is also an issue, but it's not as much as, at least the way I understand it, it's not as dominant a factor as the cultural, political climate that gets put on, right? The more direct culture. Because in Europe, the priests and everything came from the Pope, and the Pope superseded the leader of the country. Where in Japan, yes, the emperor is the top of the chain technically, but just before Musashi, right? Just relatively before he was born, the shoguns came into it, a lot of civil wars, and they had more actual power than the emperor. They kept the emperor around, but they didn't take that position. But now everything's being dictated by the shogun, who's essentially a dictator, right? And that had way more influence. The priests, they didn't really have, or the religion didn't, clergy didn't have such a powerful influence like it did in medieval Europe, right? Not as strong at all. Right? You had quite a lot of power as a priest back in that day, whereas in Japan, no. As a feudal lord, yes. As a samurai, yes, or at least more so. But even as merchants, you may have had more power than the priests. But still, I'm making the point: the very rigid society. So where, when, and much of this is um, that in that rigid society, the ideal is to be a samurai. Yes. Well, maybe a lord, but a lord is hereditary, so you can't really aspire to be that. But in a common thing, what's sort of the best to be? Like in our society, if you ask little children, like, what do you want to be? And they say cool things. Oh, I want to be a movie star or an astronaut. These things have status. Yes. Back in that day, it would have been, nobody would aspire to be a farmer, because to be a farmer was to be a peasant, and it was a very miserable existence, really. Right? Um, well, not only because you were working very hard, but you were just fodder to be picked on whenever there were wars, and there were lots of them between the different clans and lords and all this, constant, fighting between them. The peasants are the one that lose out. I need food. I go and steal it from the peasants. In Europe, it was the same thing. Incredible existence. But anyway, I'm making the point that when Musashi said that any way is a good way, we took that for granted. Right? The way of the carpenter, the way of the artisan, the way of the musician, whatever. He's saying they all this matter, all okay. That's quite revolutionary. We don't even think it's revolutionary, but at the time it was. Right? So this is a big deal that he's saying this. Yeah, very big deal. Again, I'm relating this to be more contextually, culturally, contextually, um, make to understand it within the cultural context of the time, so that we don't take these things for granted. Yes, he was quite revolutionary, even though he also said things like, well, fame and status and all this, that. But again, he may have put that in there just to appease the powers that be. You saw this a lot in European writing during this time, right? And earlier times too. We had this excessive church dominance. You would have writers who are perhaps criticizing the establishment of the church, but they would say things that are on the surface, oh no, I'm actually praising the church. They don't necessarily believe it, but they put it in there just to avoid being censured and and um and getting into trouble. So very important. All right, Beena, please continue reading. I just want to keep as a theme because Beena asked about it. You muted Beena
Yes,
to
yes,
share because when we shared this before, I shared all this background cultural stuff,
yes,
and you
yes.
see it yeah in the notes, but the notes they get a little bit yeah a little bit
The,
technical sometimes. It doesn't really help much.
I personally feel that the more rigid any society is, this is exactly directly proportional to how insecure they are. And when the insecurity was really high, which means that they were still struggling with the primitive survival mechanism there,
Oh yeah,
and
oh
of
yeah,
course,
oh yeah.
which is like duh. And we see that is some cultures, some even personal culture. In personal culture, people are very rigid, and in family culture, people are very rigid. And it's a matter of survival that okay, they want to have, and of course, also struggle for identity. It's an identity crisis. We just want to not only survive but also have to keep certain identity, which was a big deal, at least so far I understand, in Japan, to have a specific culture, a different culture, different identity than the rest of the world. And they were really trying very hard to keep it intact or even build it from the scratch. Okay. So
Yeah. All right.
the
So
way
that
of
when I
study.
was saying yes, oh, go sorry, I thought you're done. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was just started reading. So please.
Oh, oh, oh. I was saying yesterday I was talking about that obedience and loyalty. Yeah. When
Yes.
I grew up also with obedience being a very big deal, but not
Yes.
loyalty was never emphasized. Yeah.
Mm.
Whereas in samurai culture, which became Japanese culture, at least, not all of it, but to a large extent. If you go and
Mm.
work in a corporation in Japan, now they may have this in their corporate year, but it's not so much, right? Because they're dealing with employees like in other countries. But inside Japan, loyalty to your corporation is a huge deal. It's excessively important. I don't know today specifically, but certainly going back a couple decades, this was a very big deal. Yeah, I mean, it was noticeable, and it was one of the things that set Japanese corporations apart, and why they were so successful was this insane loyalty. People would work overtime like crazy just out of loyalty to the corporation, stuff like that. So the average productivity was way higher because of this loyalty commitment to the corporation. It was something that really blew away Western business when Japan came up, right? And became one of the wealthiest
Mm.
countries in the world. Yeah.
Yes.
So just to understand that, right? It's a very big deal. It's a very, very big deal. And that loyalty, it goes back to this whole samurai loyalty, which, as I explained yesterday, the misguidedness of it and the sadness that came from it and the stress and the abuse of it it's not that easy to do in corporate culture, but it's still there, right? Take advantage of people because they're being loyal. It's inappropriate use of goodness on the authority side. Application, well, I guess use of goodness, but and also from an employee, inappropriate application of goodness. But the corporate life in Japan was ended up being excessively stressful and caused a lot of problems. Like
Yes.
the stereotype of the businessman working and then they go out and get completely drunk and karaoke and all of the stuff to relieve that stress and tension. It messed
Mm.
with their lives in a big way. It's
Mm.
a very stressful corporate environment. Again, hierarchy, got to be the
Wow.
best, got to be the best, 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 best. When you focused on this being relatively better, It's a never-ending thing. You don't have a point to say, okay, now we are at a point of goodness and we can chill and relax. And no, you're always pressing for more. It's never ending. You never have enough. It's no good. I just want to put this in context, right, to understand that there's consequences to all of this stuff. And when you understand it in its fullness, it's very powerful. Very, very powerful. Yeah. And also, when he's talking about the carpenter here, for instance, and later he's going to talk about
Mhm.
basket weavers and other people, he's with his authority, because at the time of writing this, Musashi was the superstar, right? He was
Hmm.
he was the it. Yes, okay, the shogun technically had more power, but he was the superstar of that time, that culture, right? Because he'd won all of these duels. I don't know, 67 of them, and to the death duels, right? So when you talk about sword fighting or any kind of fighting, you could step on a stone and your ankle twists and you're dead just because of that,
Oh,
right? Yeah.
yes.
So the odds of you surviving are very low simply because of random factors. If you're going to be doing this
Hmm.
multiple times, you start running the risk of something happening. An insect flies into your eye at exactly the wrong moment. Well, it doesn't even have to be exactly the wrong. Any time during the fight, if you suddenly get something in your eye and your eyes watering, well, you're at a severe disadvantage. Yeah. Now, at least if the matches are relatively close, Musashi saw to it that they were not close, which we're going to see later. Yeah. But still, the odds of surviving that and the status that goes with it is huge, massive status. Yeah. So he was the
Hmm.
superstar. So when he's talking about not only samurai, but he's using the carpenter and the foreman carpenter, just this little paragraph that we're looking at here now, he's giving them a status way above what the society and the culture has at that time, right? Just by implication. Just by implication. Just because he's writing about them. He doesn't say good or bad. He doesn't say carpentry or being a carpenter is better, worse, less. It doesn't say anything. Just the fact that he uses it is powerful. All right, please go ahead, Beena. Please go ahead.
Okay. Right. Then thank you for sharing and giving us this context. So now we can read with more clarity. The way of his strategy. Like a trooper, the carpenter sharpens his own tools. He carries his equipment in his toolbox and works under the direction of his foreman. He makes columns and girders with an X, shapes floorboards and shelves with a plan, with a plane, cuts fine open work and carvings accurately, giving as excellent a finish as his skill will allow. This is the craft of the carpenters. When the carpenter becomes skilled and understands measures, he can become a foreman. The carpenter's attainment is having tools which will cut well to make small shrines, writing shelves, tables, paper lanterns, chopping boards, and portlets. These are the specialities of the carpenter. Things are similar for the trooper. You ought to think deeply about this. Why? Things are similar for the trooper. You ought to think deeply about this. The attainment
He,
of
he,
the carpenter is that, yes,
oh. So what he's wanting you to think deeply about is this: what is
yes,
similar between the carpenter and the trooper? See, Musashi again. Remember, I was saying about it doesn't have the language. Right? What he's saying is conceptually and in the abstract, what is the same? The carpenter knows his various tools. He knows when to use an axe, when to use a plane, when to use a chisel, etc. Right? Same likewise as a swordsman, as a trooper, he calls them troopers, which is a very good translation word. Um, Basically, as a foot soldier. Um, you need to know when it is that you're going to use your sword, when you're going to use the spear, when you're going to use an axe, when you're going to use a knife, etc. Right? Close quarters fighting is very different to fighting in the open. Fighting in ranks with people next to you and close to you is very different to fighting just individually on your own with lots of space. Fighting indoors, very different again, right? So all of these, you're going to use different tools for different things. So he's saying contextual appropriateness, know when to use what. Again, he doesn't spell it out because he doesn't have the communication skills, but that's what he's wanting you to think about, right? There's the
Hmm.
similarities, the abstract similarities. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. The attainment of the carpenter is that his work is not warped. Warped. Okay. That
Warped.
he joins, yes, that the joints are not misaligned, and that the work is truly planned so that it meets well and is not merely
Planed.
finished in sections.
Planed. Plane is when you
Oh,
shave
truly
off
plain.
that. It's kind of a long
Oh,
instrument,
yeah.
like a blade
Oh,
set.
yes. Okay.
Just
Okay.
yeah, that's plane. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That the work is truly plain so that it meets well and is not merely finished in sections. This is essential. If you want to learn this way, deeply consider the things written in this book one at a time. You must do sufficient research.
Right. I love this. I love that. And Musashi is going to repeat this over and over again. I mean, look, he said just in this paragraph, you ought to think deeply and deeply
Hmm.
consider, right? So he's saying,
Yes.
think it through. Now, he didn't have the language, but if he had been today, he would say, think things through to the end and perspective shift to multiple perspectives, right? We see how
Yes.
he's advocating this, even though he doesn't have the language. He's still advocating this, right? Now, if
Yes.
we take what he's saying here in the abstract, right, where the attainment of the carpenter, is that his work is not warped and joints on, and that it all fits together. In other words, so the attainment of the carpenter is that there's an overview perspective. Again, see, this is the power of Way of Impeccability. It's that language of conceptuality. Musashi didn't have it. He struggled with it, right? He knew what he was trying to, in his mind, inside the feeling, he knew what he was doing, but he didn't have the way to actually express it in words. So now the lesson in this particular paragraph, yes, is not
Yes.
merely finished in sections. You can't have just your door being perfect, but oh, it's a very beautiful door, but it doesn't slide properly. Yes, well, that
Hmm.
doesn't help. Yeah, it has to fit. And also, if you're doing the door in a particular style and the rest of the house is in some other style, it's like but out. You have to have balance. Everything has to integrate. It has to fit together. It has to work together. So you have to look at not only being perfect in the precise thing that you're doing, which is, planing this particular piece of wood to have it nice and smooth and even. The thing needs to actually work. It needs to fit into the whole. And you see this in swordsmanship specifically, right? You go in a dojo and you're practicing your cut, right? All right, you're doing a cross cut, for instance, and you got it down perfect. You may have each individual stroke, and they have names for them, right? You got a cross cut, a side cut, you got a thrust, you got a block, you got a parry, whatever, right? All these different strokes in sword play. 1 second. Thank you,
Yes.
Amazon. See you, mate. Yeah, it gives me a wave. I see him on the camera. Right. So now you can practice those individual strokes, which is the same as having nice beams cut, having nice smooth plane, and nicely polished, nicely. But it's individual. They need to fit together. If you don't know how to use that cut within the fight, the overall battle, it's a total waste. Yes. And this is actually something that literally happens in martial arts, all kinds of martial arts. People know the parts, but they don't know how to put it together as a whole. Make sense?
Hmm.
Right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So this is very, very powerful. Now, this doesn't just apply, of course, to carpenters and swordsmen. It applies
Hmm.
likewise with what we are doing right now. So, way of impeccability, or the language of conceptuality, or the philosophy of appropriateness, particularly philosophy of appropriateness, it starts at the top, right, Beena?
Yes.
It's a top-down understanding. And in this top-down understanding, we now end up in a situation where we are putting everything in a particular context, and the parts serve the whole. They aren't just parts, right? So it doesn't matter. It has to be appropriate in the overall. Philosophy of appropriateness isn't just about being appropriate now, today, in what I'm doing, right? Like, for instance, I need to be appropriate within the context of making this video, but that's not all. If I'm doing things that satisfy the intent of the video, but are inappropriate in my life in general, yes, well, that's no good. And if what I'm doing, let's say, I'm doing the videos and I have a regular job. If I'm doing things in the video which are appropriate for the video, appropriate to the purpose of doing the videos, but affect my job. Let's say I'm doing videos and I'm doing really ridiculous and crazy things that make my employer look bad. Well, I'm going to lose my job. Yeah. See, it has to balance.
Mm.
But then also, what about your life context? You need to be appropriate in the context of your integrity, in your spirit, in your growth, your path, where you're going, right? So we want this appropriateness in all contexts. And now we get to going even further than Musashi, because he's only taking it within the context of your profession, your activity. He's not taking it in the context of your internalness, right? Not like spiritual appropriateness, right? Learning and growth appropriateness, awareness appropriateness. So that's the magic of what we do in terms of Way-of-Impeccability, Moreness-Project, etc. Right? Looking at the total chair. But again, too, you must do sufficient research. Don't just believe me. Go and test it. Research involves testing, correct?
Mm.
So don't just believe me.
Yes.
Apply it, test it, check it out, check it out, check it out. Yeah, very, very cool. All right, so now we come to today's. That was still part of yesterday. We didn't finish that. It was still yesterday was all about way of strategy. But here we come to today. So please read, Beena.
Okay. Outline of the 5 books of this book of strategy. The way is shown as 5 books concerning different aspects. Mm. Where is this now?
It didn't move.
Okay. Oh, it really jumps big time for me.
Wow, I didn't do
Okay.
anything. That's interesting.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The way is shown as 5 books concerning different aspects. These are ground, water, fire, tradition, wind, and void.
Right. Now that's really interesting. The way the translator has written that. He didn't write it
Yes.
as ground, fire, water, wind, and put tradition in brackets. He put wind in brackets. Seems
Yes.
to me it should be the other way around, right? I mean, that again, too, maybe misunderstood, which is these are groundwater, fire, and wind, which are the traditional aspects. I don't think wind is traditional. I think the meaning there is those are the traditional, and then you get void, which is not traditional.
Yes.
See? So I think
Yes.
that's a translation error there. So just keep this
Yes.
in
Very.
mind. It seems rather obvious. It may be that that's what Musashi wrote when that's not necessarily what he intended. Yes. So we already know
Yes.
Musashi is not the greatest writer. So that could be that's how he wrote it, but it needed to be edited. Yeah.
Hmm. The body of the way
So
of strategy from the viewpoint of my Aichi school is explained
Ichi.
in the
Yeah.
Ichi. Okay, I
I
don't
think
like to
so.
say that, but okay. But okay. Ichi school is explained in the groundwork. It is difficult to realize the true way just through sword fencing.
Right,
Though the
right, right,
smallest
right. Look at
things,
that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. That is very significant. Yes. It is
yes,
difficult to realize the true way, capital W way, just through sword fencing. Yeah.
yes,
Uh, that that's very, very powerful there because for those who are were into sword fencing, and even if you're not, it's seen as, well, I'm not into it personally, but I should. That's like the way to get somewhere, right? The way to getting to being somebody, achieving somebody. But they mistake it. They just learn to be good swordsmen. yes, or Saul's
Mm.
people, if women were doing it also, not that they were, but there were women that used like naginatas, but that's a different story. But still, the idea from a not a particularly sophisticated point of view is that that's what you're supposed to do, and you just do it. You don't really think it through, right? But he's saying the way is more than the specific thing that you're doing. He could have just as well have said basket weaving or carpentry or painting or music or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So it is difficult to realize the true way through just a particular activity, to say it more in the abstract. Yeah.
yes. It is difficult to realize the true way just through the sword fencing. You know, the smallest things and the biggest things, the shallowest things and the deepest things, as if it were a straight board mapped out on the ground. The first book is called The Ground Book. Second is the Water Book, with water as the basis. The spirit becomes like water. Water adopts the shape of its receptacle. It is sometimes a trickle and sometimes a wild sea. Water has a clear blue color. By the clarity, things of Ichi school are shown in this book. By the clarity,
Uh,
things-
yeah, yeah. By the
yes.
way, this is not actually true.
The color blue,
It,
yes, the water has a
yeah,
clear,
that's it's reflecting the sky. It's not the water that's
yeah,
blue, it's the sky. But yeah.
yes, yes. By the clarity, things of Ichi schools are shown in this book. If you master the principles of sword fencing, when you freely beat one man, you beat any man in the world. The spirit of
Wow,
defeating a man is the same. You know?
wow, wow. Okay, I just want to come back to this. This type of thing. We must understand, as much as Musashi is a revolutionary, he also carries that arrogance of his status and the arrogance of the class, right? I'm a
Yes,
samurai, I know better automatically. They don't check what they say and what is obvious. Yeah. And you see this very often in today's world. People say things that are on the surface, very obviously not so. Yeah. If it said
yes,
open water as a clear blue color, yeah, then fine. But well, when I put water in my glass, uh, I don't see any blue in it. Yes.
yes,
So it's really interesting that as Aristotle was famous for saying things like this. Yeah, stuff that he didn't check. I mean, one of the most famous was saying men and women had the same amount of teeth. They don't. But he never went to Xantippe and said, "Hey, Xantippe, please open your mouth. Let me check." Well, Xantippe being a Xantippe, that might not have been the easiest thing to do.
yes,
So
not fun
I'm
way to
having a little
actually.
fun with the word here. So
Yes,
Aristotle's wife's name was Xantippe, and she was famously a shrew, a really irritable, crotchety person, right? There's a wonderful ad that has this woman, older woman, and she dresses up as a scarecrow and she's well, kind of that's Xantippiness, right? Just not a nice person. So maybe he never asked her to open her mouth so they could count her teeth because he would have gotten a mouthful of teeth coming at him, right? But still, I mean, he could ask anybody, it's not something hard to check, but he never checked. He just assumed. And that's just one instance, one that stuck with me as being amusing, yeah, because of but same thing here. It's like, this is not even a matter of checking it elsewhere. Eh, This is just sloppy thinking, right? It's just poor. It's like, wow. So we have to be really also keep this in mind. This kind of arrogance is part of Musashi also. Yes. The sloppiness. Yeah. Or assumptiveness. Yeah. Because it's making an important point by the clarity. Things of Ishi school are shown in the book. Now that's important. But, I mean, if the blue was left out, water has a clear color. Then it would make sense. But the blue, I don't know. maybe it's a translation error, and since there was a translation issue up ahead here, I'm just going to assume it's that, because that seems something that even even with that arrogance, it seems a little odd to me, right? So I'm just going to assume it's a translation error. You know that the word clear and blue and color, they all in the kanji all kind of connected, right? And it could mean all three. And so that's just how, those kanjis are. They're complicated. All right. So you read this, right? If you master the principles of sword fencing, when you freely beat one man, you may beat any man in the world. Well, that's a big claim, but it's this word freely. We're going to sort of see what he means by this, but that's a very big claim. At least, eh,
I personally assume that what he's saying, that if you feel, when you freely beat one, when you do something without a guilt, that opens up really the moreness door for you. Okay, in this case, it's a negative thing that you are actually beating someone or killing someone here. But when you do that with the clarity of intent, without guilt, when you do anything, that becomes really a foundation and it opens up the door for the moreness. Now the
it's
number,
about
it becomes
possibility.
irrelevant. Yes, then
Right,
numbers becomes irrelevant because you are
right.
now free. It's all coming back to you now. That now you have no guilt, you have no stress, you were clear about what you were doing.
Yeah.
So now whoever is going to come, it's not going to be a problem for you.
Right. I mean, it's about possibility. If you can technically do one, then you can do more. Now, of course,
Exactly.
when it comes to the sword fencing, this is absolutely a poor example, if you ask me, because
Yes.
the person that you're beating may have no interest in fighting you, may have, willingly surrendered, may just be intimidated. And the next guy you come who actually puts up a fight, and then, you can stake your life on this, you're going to die. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's about the possibility. But again, I would assume, yeah, this poorly written to say freely. If you can genuinely, in a real, actual contest, beat an opponent that actually has real skill. But even then, the range of skill differences between professionals and amateurs, the gulf is so vast that it's astonishing, the difference, right? I mean, you can see this in things like professional sports. Yeah, when amateurs play against professionals, there's no comparison. So I don't know. It's in the abstract. I understand what he's saying about possibility, but I'm going to have to put this down uh, to translation and understand that, fine, if you do it once, there's the potential that you can do more, but it doesn't mean that it's so in actuality. The spirit of defeating a man is the same for 10 million men. Interesting. Yeah. I think he's saying conceptually it's the same. Yeah. You have to have the same mindset to beat one as to beat any, and the same mindset to beat one as to beat 10 million.
Okay, so like now just take it in a bit more abstract way. That a guy who can murder or kill one man, okay, now with a dagger or whatever, a rifle or a gun or a rock, whatever means he had at the time or they had at the time, and they killed that without having any guilt, absolute clarity, whatever they were doing, they had a reason and absolute clarity, and they were doing that. Now just assume that that person have access to atom bomb. Now killing a million is not going to be a problem for him, for them at all. Now it just depends on the access of uh, on the possibilities. So on a larger scale, for them it is just like clicking one button. Okay, I did, and I killed them. So that it's
Yeah,
all
I,
about
I, I think
coming
he's
back into
saying
the
it's about
mindset. It's
abstract.
a mindset thing. If you can
Yeah,
kill one, killing a million, if you have access, will not be a problem.
correct, correct. It's to see the commonality from an abstract point of view, because the next part here makes that a bit more clear. Read that to the end of the paragraph, then I'll elaborate a bit more.
Mhm. Okay. For 10 million men, the strategist makes small things into big things, like building a great Buddha. from a 1 foot model. Exactly. Okay. I cannot write in detail how this is done. The principle of a strategy is having one thing. To know 10,000 things, things of Ichi school are written in this, the water book. In this, the water book. Okay.
Yeah,
Third is
yeah.
the fire
So
book.
abstract thinking, Beena, abstract thinking.
Yes.
That's what he's talking
Mhm.
about. He doesn't have the way to express it, the way to understand it, but this is what he's talking about. Abstract
Yes.
thinking. Yeah.
Third is the fire book. This book is about fighting. The spirit of fire is fierce, whether the fire be small or big. And so it is with battles. The way of battles is the same for men to men fights and for 10,000 aside battles. You must appreciate that the spirit can become big or small. What is big is easy to perceive, what is small is difficult to perceive. In short, it is difficult for large numbers of men to change position. So their movements can be easily predicted. An individual can easily change his mind, so his movements are difficult to predict. You must appreciate this. The essence of this book is that you must train day and night in order to make quick decisions. In strategy, it is necessary to treat training as a part of normal life with your spirit unchanging. Thus, combat in battle is described in the fire book. You want to elaborate?
No, again, it's just about that ability to perceive appropriately. Yes,
And also
and
he's saying about like way of being. It's not
sure,
just okay living artificially, trying to learn something
yeah,
artificially. Truly have trust in it, and then of course make it part of your being. Then you can
yeah,
actually build something. And also
yeah,
changing a
yeah,
perspective on that, we get overwhelmed by the number and the quantity of things. We get really overwhelmed by that. But
yeah,
what he's saying
yeah.
that okay, if you change your perspective, you will see the advantages of big numbers and advantages
Right.
of small numbers and
Exactly.
disadvantages.
Exactly. I want to see if we can get to the end of the section here, Bina. So I
Okay.
want to hold off on commentary for tomorrow. So let's just finish the whole section here.
Okay. Fourthly, the wind book. This book is not concerned with my Ichi school, but with other schools of strategy. By win, I mean old traditions, present day traditions, and family traditions of strategy. Thus, I clearly explain the strategies of the world. This is tradition. It is difficult to know yourself if you do not know others. To always there are side tracks. To always there are side tracks. If you study a way daily and your spirit diverges, you may think you are obeying a good way, but objectively it is not the true way. If you are following the true way and diverge a little, this will later become a large divergence. You must realize this. Other strategies have come to be thought of as mere sword fencing, and it is not unreasonable that this should be so. The benefit of my strategy, although it includes sword fencing, lies in a separate principle. I have explained what is commonly meant by strategy in other schools in the tradition, Wind Book. Fifthly, the Book of the Void. By void, I mean that which has no beginning and no end. Attaining this principle means not attaining the principle. The way of strategy is the way of nature. When you appreciate the power of nature, knowing the rhythm of any situation, you will be able to hit the enemy naturally and strike naturally. All this is the way of void. I intend to show how to follow the true way according to nature in the book of the void.
Right. So now
This
also
is so
nature here, I take it
wonderful.
to be, oh
It
yeah, not
is,
necessarily
it's,
nature as in plants and animals, but nature as in the underlying abstract conception. So all right,
and what
let's
he's
keep going
talking
because
about here is an
yeah,
appropriateness.
yeah, yeah. I'm keen to get to the end. We'll go over
Warriors,
this again tomorrow. Yeah,
the name Ichi-ryo Nito, one school, two swords.
yeah.
Warriors, both commanders and troopers, carry two swords at their belt. In olden times, these were called the long sword and the sword. Nowadays, where it is, nowadays, they are known as the sword and the companion sword. Let it
Right.
suffice to say that in your land, in our land, Whatever the reason, a warrior carries two swords at his belt. It is the way of the warrior.
Right. So real quick,
Nito,
this was mandatory to carry those two swords. The two of them
okay,
together are called a daisho, which means
right,
that companion sword, and dai
yeah,
also being two. But the long sword is the katana, and the shorter sword is the wakizashi. And then you also
oh,
carry the tanto, which is the knife. But the daisho is the set, and you were obligated to carry that as a samurai. You could not leave the house and go outside without having your two swords on your person. You'd get into big trouble if you didn't have them.
hmm, hmm, okay. Nito Ichiryo shows the advantage of using both swords. The spear and the halberd are weapons
Yeah.
which are carried out of doors. Students of the Ichi school way of strategy should train from the start with the sword and long sword in either hand. This is a truth. When you sacrifice your life, you must make fullest use of your weaponry. It is false not to do so, and to die with a weapon yet undrawn. If you hold a sword with both hands, it is difficult to wield it freely to left and right. So my method is carry the sword in one hand. This does not apply to large weapons such as the spear or halberd, but swords
Yeah.
and companion swords can be carried in one hand. It is encumbering to hold a sword in both hands when you are on horseback, when running on uneven roads, on swampy grounds, muddy rice fields, stony ground, or in a crowd of people. To hold the long sword in both hands is not the true way. For if you carry a bow or spear, or you want to scroll it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Or other arms, in your left hand, you have only one hand free for the long sword. However, when it is difficult to cut an enemy down with one hand, you must use both hands. It is not difficult to wield a sword in one hand. The way to learn this is to train with two long swords, one in each hand. It will seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first. Bows are difficult to draw. Halberds are difficult to wield. As you become accustomed to the bow, so your pull will become stronger. When you become used to wielding the long sword, you will gain the power of the way and wield the sword well. As I will explain in the second book, the water book, there is no fast way of wielding the long sword. The long sword should be wielded broadly, and the companion sword closely. This is the first thing to realize. According to this Ichi school, you can win with a long weapon, and yet you can also win with a short weapon. In short, the way of the Ichi school is the spirit of winning, whatever weapon and whatever its size. It is better to use two swords rather than one when you are fighting a crowd, and especially if you want to take a prisoner. These things cannot be explained in detail from one thing. No, okay, from one thing, no 10,000 things. When you attain the way of strategy, you will, there is, yes, when you attain the way of strategy, there will not be one thing you cannot see. You must study hard.
All right. Give me 1 second here. I just want to end it on Instagram.
Yes.
But we can continue on here because there are a couple of things I want to explain here. But Instagram only gives for the hour, so we'll see if this works now. So I did get it within the hour there. Um, a couple of things here. When he's talking about the spear, the halberds there, he's talking about a yari and a naginata. A yari had a straight blade, and the naginata
Hmm.
had that curved blade, very distinctive curved blade, and they used differently, right? A different point to them. One is for stabbing, the other one is for slicing at a distance. And women were trained in the use of the spear, and particularly naginata. It's quite interesting. And they're different too. I mean, yes, they are similar European halberds, especially the spear, but not the naginata is somewhat different to typical halberds in European warfare. In European warfare, halberds, they are dozens of different varieties. It's quite fascinating. Really very interesting. And again, just understanding this. Well, let me see if I can get an image of halberds. Again, looking and thinking a little bit outside the box. Yeah, we look at halberds and we sort of don't understand why things are, and we just assume and we take for granted according to our understanding. Yes. Um, but right, yeah, yeah, this is a great example, right? And you sort of you think this is, yes, you imagine this has got one thing for cutting, this for fighting, but there's a reason for this design beside just the obvious one of a martial arts application. Yeah, like this one
Mm.
especially. And this they used for scaling walls or doors. You would take that pole, you chop it into, like a big wooden large gate, pull yourself up on the wall and jump over. Yeah, or stockades, like a fort out in the, we're just making a fort and you build it with wooden poles, right? Like a big tall wooden fence. You see the logic of this, Beena? You chop it in
Yes.
and it will stick there, and then you climb up the pole and you stand, you put your foot on this part and jump over. Isn't that interesting, Beena? I mean, besides the
Yes.
fighting aspect, with the point and all this, you know, um, it's very interesting that it's a sort of a use that we don't really realize. You see, and there are many variations of it here. This one's a little shorter, but that is one of the uses for it. Now they all have different uses, and look, you just see a little bit here. This is not even showing close to the amount of variety. This one, I guess, is a little bit more, but just fascinating how and all specific and detailed. It's fascinating stuff. But again, train your eyes to look beyond what is the obvious, what you assume it to be. Yes, and especially when things don't
Yes.
make sense, you go that little extra step. Right? Now, it's very interesting how he says this, that some things can't be explained. You can't explain them, Musashi, but that doesn't mean they can't be explained. Musashi was famous for having two long swords, right? And you'll see most pictures of him with two long swords, and he used a katana that was longer than standard. Now, when you go back to this, right, and put it into cultural context, the way you were to fight as a samurai, there was the supposed to was very, very, very detailed and specific, extremely so, right? Very, very proscribed, very specific. Yeah. And the sword as a standard length, blah, blah, blah. And of course, even though you're carrying the two swords, the idea is that you use the long sword outdoors and use the katana outdoors, the wakizashi indoors, and the tantos like your utility knife. And okay. But the traditional schools were stuck on this idea of these two things because it's form and pose, and there's a style, there's a ritual to do it. Right? And they were so completely entrenched in this. There was just no thought of doing it other ways. So Musashi saying you got to put a sword in each hand. This is like sacrilege. It's like
Mm.
heretical. Yeah. It's hard
Mm.
to describe how much that is. I'm trying to think of where people have been doing things in a traditional way. And somebody comes, yeah, but why don't you do it this way? Yeah, but that's the way we've always done it. This is tradition. And they get really hung up on this. They get really stuck on it in the sense that they can't move out of that. Right? They can't shift away from it. They just absolutely have no ability to say, yeah, but just because it's traditional doesn't mean it's the best way. I don't know why I'm not seeing myself here today, Bina. I don't get this. Anyway, you know. So this rigidity of tradition, when he says put things in two hands, it's hard to comprehend how radical this is, even though you say, yeah, so what? You're looking to fight. No, that rigidity and supposed to and tradition, oh, it's huge in this culture. So he's being exceedingly radical here to say fight. And not just fight with the long sword and the short sword, but to fight with two long swords. This is unbelievably radical. Now, in European fighting, especially later after armor died because of crossbows and other powerful weaponry, the full heavy metal armor, it went out of fashion, and it said it didn't matter because a crossbow, the big heavy crossbows, they could punch right through the armor. And then, of course, when gunpowder came along, it also made that it just made you slow and clumsy. So the fighting changed. And then you get the rapier, which is a one-handed weapon. It's light and it's very long distance. But when you have a rapier, you also fight with it's called the main gauche, which is it's not it's not like a short sword. It's like more like a long dagger, but it's in the left hand because you maneuver the person, you come up close, and you finish him with the main gauche. And so very interesting stuff. Just again, all right, it's very specific in weaponry, but that there's a correspondence. This idea of two hands in two different parts of the world, unrelated at the time, but they developed in the same way because there's a logic to things, right? When you start to think about them a bit. But you would think when you do think it's very obvious, but the ability to think about things, especially think them through to the end, and when you come up with a conclusion that goes against tradition, this becomes an incredible rarity. Right? People do things for the same old, even though they don't really work. It's absolutely fascinating, especially in warfare. Stuff stayed the same for longest times because there's a lot of resistance to change, right? You come up with a new weapon, you have to issue your whole army this new weapon, and that costs a lot of money. So you have to have really, really strong proof that it works. And it's hard to convince people who don't want to spend the money sometimes, right? Bureaucrats. No, but that's how we did it traditionally. They cannot go against tradition because they're so conditioned not to go against tradition. And in a culture that worships tradition, right, where tradition is a huge, big deal, this is a major mental obstacle. And we're going to see later how Musashi leverages this. He leverages it profoundly. And he won most of his deals, even though he wasn't actually the better swordsman, technically. Very interesting. Oh, very, very powerful. Yeah, Beena?
Yes. Yes.
Again, he's a revolutionary in this. It seems simple to us, but when we understand it in context. But even today, though, how many things don't people do simply because that's how you're supposed to do it? Can you think of some examples, Beena?
Many things in my life. Many things in my life. Like we're supposed to do that.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
for following up certain rules in the family, which actually so far I didn't find any logical reason for that.
Correct.
Like to
Correct.
not say things which are true. Okay, but if they are saying something, you're supposed to not say that. And that is a big battle for me in my internally. It's a big internal battle for me that when doing something is not bad or inappropriate, why just mentioning it is so inappropriate. But this is a culture. It's a common culture in every part of the world. Whoever is doing that, if
Not
he,
asking questions.
yes,
Traditionally, asking questions is almost seen as rude, as
yes,
obnoxious, etc.
yes,
It's like,
oh,
how in the earth do you go through life not asking questions? I mean, I
yes,
understand not asking questions of others because you may bother them and being impolite and inconsiderate. But even so, how do you like to say your kids don't ask questions? You might as well say be stupid.
yes. Like,
Because
and also
internally you
like
stop asking
we're
questions.
supposed to be nice with everyone.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the
So
idea.
there's another thing. Exactly. Lots of supposed to be's. Yeah. Yeah. Well, more pertinent is the, let's take it where it's negative. You're supposed to be traumatized, upset, sobbing tears when you have a breakup. Nonsense.
Yes.
Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Yeah. Not necessarily so. And when
Not
Musashi
necessarily.
says if something can be won, it can be in general. When there's one
Yeah.
exception, there can be more. Yeah, and that served me really well. When I noticed, hey, here's
Okay.
somebody who had a breakup and they aren't upset. Well, it's not because they callous, it's just that they did something differently. Oh, well, when people die, you're supposed to be sad. Says who? Not all cultures have this. Yeah, there are some cultures that throw a party when there's death, right? They celebrate this. You're
Yes.
achieving your next milestone. There's a whole different perception to death, to what we are used to. Just because we're used to it doesn't make it actually true or sensible or realistic. You're doing it out of tradition, not because it makes sense. Yeah? And
Mhm.
in the transition course that I have, transition through change, it's dealing with loss of any kind, whether it be a relationship, a job, your favorite item, or death. Doesn't matter. You can come at it from very different angles. And actually, I explain how, if you truly love people, to be sad is the worst thing you want to do. Yeah. But anyway, it's going into it from an all different point, but to break from tradition, in other words, to realize that we can do this, and just because it's tradition doesn't make it right. But that's what tradition is. It says it is right and good and sensible because it's tradition. And of course, this is completely ridiculous,
Yes.
completely traditional. I mean, you could say outdoor toilets are traditional. How come you're not using an outdoor toilet anymore?
Yes.
It's very convenient, how that gets abused. But when we understand our culture comes from the worst of us, of course, they push this thing of tradition because it's a way of manipulating people and controlling them. Oh, sorry, 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 sorry. Somebody's asking a question here. We are reading Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings. Yes. Sorry, I
Okay.
only saw your question now. My bad. My bad. Sorry. Yeah. This is the Ramen God. Wow. Would Ramen God uh, be, well, if you're Ramen God 69, are you a 69th incarnation of Naruto? Yeah. I
Oh,
hope they haven't left that we didn't think we're ignoring the question. Yeah. Yeah. And they're on YouTube actually. Very cool.
yes.
Let me respond to them. Yeah. Go ahead, Beena, comment while I type here, please.
Okay, so yes, a lot of things, and especially about Miyamoto Musashi, because for some reason, for some really strong reasons, I have, which I will share later, that I was thinking about Miyamoto Musashi, and I was thinking again, uh, when we really try to practice capital H hearing. In this case, of course, I'm practicing capital H hearing by doing the capital R reading of Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, that what he was trying to share at that time. So of course, for that you need to pay attention to the context, like, okay, and the surrounding, and what was the culture thing. When I was thinking about the void, as a fifth book, he says that for me, the void is telling you that the appropriateness, of course, not with the much clarity, not with much maybe understanding also from his side, but the abstract of it, the crux of it, for me, is instead of void, you could say appropriateness. Because he's saying that, okay, you could band your rules and you can do this. There is no rule, of course. When it is not, there is no rule. What else we have? Appropriateness. No rules. Just be
Oh,
appropriate. And this is what he is trying to, at least with the introduction. Of course, I could be wrong because I haven't read the whole thing yet, but this is what I'm getting from it. But see that whenever someone, or many, of course, number of people even, when they're trying to share a new idea, something which is not usual, something which is not uh, was not available before, they do struggle, not because of their own understanding. Mostly they struggle because how to communicate it to you.
Yeah. Correct.
And
Correct.
that's
Musashi
something very
understood,
important.
but he struggled to
Yes,
communicate. Yes.
yes. So, and that is something we are really experiencing right now. And this is really wonderful to see that, because now I'm able to. Sophistication, of course, comes later. In the beginning, as Syl says about writing, that okay, write ugly and edit pretty. This is exactly what is happening on an abstract way also. On a larger scale, look at the history. When people start sharing, it was raw, it was rough. And
Yeah.
as the time passed by, as people started
Yeah.
coming in,
Yeah.
and the ideas becoming more and more innate to them,
Yeah.
look at the sophistication now we have.
Very different.
That is
Very
something
different.
wonderful.
Very different. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So Raymond, God, thank you for your question there. This is very cool. Very cool. Usually, I put it in the title, and then afterwards I update the title with description of what we're doing. Yeah. I appreciate your question very much. I appreciate your question very much. So on that note, Beena, I think we end there, right? Unless you have something more
yes.
to share.
No, thank you so much for that. And
Yeah.
this is wonderful, because we are not actually keeping it very long, because of course, some other reason. But also, I feel that it's a very dense, it's a very important
Yeah.
sharing what you're doing, because capital R reading, even
Yeah.
if you are doing a capital R reading of just a comic, the
Can do it on
process
anything.
itself,
Can do it on anything. Yeah.
yes, the process itself is very important. Right? It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
dense. We
Yeah.
need, of course, to time to digest and make it innate, and of course, think about it. So, thank you so much, Sir, for sharing. Thank you so much, whoever was watching us in the group on Instagram. Of course, I know that some people were there. They were joining us, and they were watching us, listening to the capital R reading of Miyamoto Musashi, and especially here on YouTube. Thank you so much, Raymond God, to be there and asking question. We would love to have you tomorrow also, and continue. And then, of
Yes.
course,
Yes.
the same
Yes.
time, do these lives on YouTube at the same time every day. So
Yes.
this is
So for
something to
Raymond
pay
God,
attention to. We will mention that. Yes.
keep going. Uh, keep going. I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that okay. From now on, you will mention that we are doing this every day at the same time.
Correct.
This
Correct.
is
There we
something we
go.
need to pay
That's
attention
what I
to.
wanted to say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Every
Yes.
day except Saturday. We do it the same time. And
Yes.
we really invite comments and questions and interactions. We love having the interactions. And even if you watch later, if you comment, we'll always respond. Always. Always. Yes. Very
Yes.
important to us. Very important to us. All right. On that
Yes.
note, we'll end meeting, and I'm gonna come back on Zoom, Bina, because I have stuff to do that needs screen sharing. But I'm gonna end and
Okay. Thank you
restart.
so much, everyone, for being here. Love to
Yes.
see you guys tomorrow also, and of course, throughout the week. By doing that, please, if you are watching us like Raymond God, you were there. Please do like, comment, share, and subscribe to YouTube channel. Because
Yeah.
by doing so, you are going to train your algorithm, and by training your algorithm, you are going to contribute to enhance and develop the Moreness culture. And this is what we are actually looking for. So please do that. That would be really a good help. And same for everyone on Instagram, on TikTok. Please do follow, click like, and share and subscribe too. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sil, for sharing this thing.
Pleasure, being a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. That was fun. I'm enjoying doing Musashi. I'm doing Musashi. Very cool.
Okay, sir.
All right,
Bye for
everybody.
now.